Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching or listening to this, and welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa Kinski. I'm your producer and co-host, and joined as always by Francois Jeffrey. Francois, how are you doing today?
I am great. It's Friday. We have a long weekend. We have a lot going on this weekend. How are you?
I'm good. We just had De Cuban, which is like my favorite local restaurant ever.
Probably mine too.
It's so good. That green sauce. I was just telling Jack, I was like, I know my birthday is in July, but I just want a vat of the green sauce for my birthday. That's literally it. I'm excited about the 5K, but I'm a little worried that it might not happen because we are expecting some inclement weather this weekend, and Georgia is not prepared ever.
Yeah, what you guys are talking about yesterday blew my mind, being from the Northeast. It's just like we drive probably in like a foot of snow if we need to go somewhere still. And that's still a 2-wheel drive. No one invests in a 4-wheel drive car, really. But here it's like, even if what you explain it to me, it ices over and then it gets warm. So and then it just keeps layering on top. So it makes sense.
Yes. So don't be silly and try to drive on it, because you 100% are going to get stuck. Because if you get stuck, I'm not coming to get you. Let the record show.
I'm AAA. It's
AAA can't get to you, darling. Can't nobody get to you.
It'll be fine. It'll all be fine
until it thaws.
You know where you can't get stuck? The metaverse.
Too early. It is 1:00, but it's too early in the day for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's we were chatting with our guests a little bit about it, and hopefully we could dive into it a little bit more today, because I know they got into a few other projects. So
yeah. Maybe later on in the conversation, because I want to talk about like what they do specifically.
Yeah,
because
I was super excited when I saw the website, because
I told you I book these strategically. I know what you want. I know what the people want.
Well, yeah, it's something as a consumer that you don't really think about, right? You just think, oh yeah, let me take a quiz. Well, let's let him explain it. And that way we can get both sides of the story.
Exactly. Yes. From the provider side and from the consumer side. So today we have with us Gen Furukawa with PreHook. Gen, hello. And hello from Georgia to Texas. I'm excited.
Hey, Lisa. Hey, Francois. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I'm so excited. I love Austin so much. I don't know why.
Me too.
You're in Texas.
Yeah. If you want a vat of green sauce, there are many places that have good green sauce. They come in little packets. A vat sounds a little excessive.
It is excessive, but that's why I want it, because the Cuban place that we get, it comes in these little like baby ramekins, but it's so good. I literally take 4 or 5 of them. Oh, it's so good.
That's my secret. Yeah, take a handful and then whatever you don't use, you take home.
Yeah.
And you just keep them forever. Yes.
Classy.
It's incredible. But when my friend and I went to Austin for her birthday, I got, I think, a country fried steak at this one restaurant that we went to. This was the biggest country fried steak I've ever seen in my life. And I'm from Georgia, and we don't mess around with food. But Texas really, wow, everything is bigger in Texas. Like, it's true. It's true what they say. It's crazy. But thank you so much for joining us today. So we are talking today about e-commerce quizzes. I think consumers interact with them and they don't actually know what they are. I don't think they realize what they're doing whenever they're taking an e-commerce quiz. So can you tell us a little bit about what they are, who you are, what PreHook does, how it came to be 2022 when we're supposed to be quarantined for 2 weeks, like, and all the answers to the world.
Yeah, well, let me try and answer for my little corner of the world. So my name is Gen Furukawa. I'm a co-founder of PreHook. So PreHook is a quiz platform for Shopify merchants. And I like to think of it a little bit more in the macro sense of like, it's not a quiz platform per se, but like the value is not the quiz, but these days it's more about the zero party data. And what I mean by that is data that customers willingly and proactively share with you. So there might be first party data that a brand is definitely tracking, which is what's passively consumed. And that's like purchase order or products purchased, transactions, maybe geography based on where they live, or second or third party data is like that, but just packaged up and resold. But that world is kind of going away now. You've probably heard of iOS 14, iOS 15. third-party cookies being deprecated from Chrome. So what's more important now, especially as advertising channels are becoming less profitable for brands, is for brands to have a direct channel to consumers, learn more about them, what their needs are, what their goals, their preferences, their challenges, capture contact information, whether it's an email or SMS, or Francois, we were talking about a crypto wallet, and then recommend a product. And then the quiz kind of personalizes the experience and like, hey, Lisa, you like green sauce, you like running, here's a product that makes sense for you. And that's great because it simplifies the buying process. So there's that element of conversion rate optimization or simplifying the buying process and the decisions. But I think maybe more importantly is what we learn about you and then how that can be used across channels to communicate. And in that sense, we are sending more relevant campaigns or offers, and we're tailoring the content specifically to you. And that's what consumers are looking for. And that's what we're able to provide.
So did you used to be a seller yourself and saw this need in the industry for more information? Like, where did this idea come from?
Yeah. So I have been a seller, actually an Amazon seller. And so previously I worked at Jungle Scout, which is a leading software tool for Amazon sellers. And my two co-founders were developers. We were part of the early team at Jungle Scout. And we realized that we wanted to work on something on our own. And that there was this challenge that e-commerce merchants had, which is not knowing exactly what problem they were solving for and not knowing what their customers were looking for. So after doing some conversations and learning from merchants, kind of validating that, yes, this was a challenge, we built it. So we started in spring of 2020 in terms of like building it out, launched like maybe 10 months later in 2021, and have had great feedback from merchants. And like I was mentioning, the landscape of e-commerce and e-commerce marketing has changed significantly in that, that 1 year span.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Can we touch on that a little bit? For those that aren't familiar with the cookies changing, and I think Google recently pushed it to 2024 or 2025.
Oh, did they? I thought it was 2023, but
It could be.
They
You,
very well could have.
I'm not completely sure, and I think that's where but not to get political, but I think the lobbyists were pushing for it because the merchants were pushing the lobbies, something along those lines, where it got extended. But definitely doing your homework. And are any other ad platforms doing something similar to where they are, I guess, taking away after giving so much, starting to take away some of this customer data and customer insight?
Well, there's GDPR in Europe.
Mhm.
There's like the California privacy laws. I believe Firefox is making cookies less accessible, and of course there's like Apple iOS 14 is an update that basically makes it harder to track a customer's transactions and behavior across different sites. And so how this impacts e-commerce merchants is that Facebook doesn't have the customer data with which to target their ads. And so merchants have less specificity. So it's kind of like a broader targeting because there's just not those data points to work with. So ultimately, return on ad spend and cost per acquisition are increasing, or return on ad spend is decreasing and the cost per acquisition is increasing. So it's becoming less profitable to run ads because it's just harder to target. And
because you're going to have to target. I guess you have to just hit a bigger audience to try to hit the right people to buy your product. Is that right?
Basically, because Facebook doesn't necessarily know what whereas before, pre iOS 14, they would know what you purchased, what you clicked, what you added to cart, more data about you. But that now needs to be an opt-in. So once you you update your Apple iPhone to iOS 14, then you basically say, do you want to allow third-party apps to track your
That's
your
what that is.
Yeah.
I have seen it so many times, and I've always just click no, because it's like I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're gonna do, and yeah, it's something I never really thought about, I guess, as a consumer. But if it doesn't change anything for me as a or I guess it changes, but it doesn't like immediately change something for me, then yeah, I would click no. That's okay. That's interesting. Um, and with merchants, when it comes to PPC, I also taking into consideration that just the competition is skyrocketing, right? So the
Mhm.
cost for keywords and for hitting the same person is also going up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're seeing that. And yeah, that merchants, it seems like 2021 has been a very hard year, especially like supply chain logistics issues. And then compounding that with the challenges with marketing, like targeting and acquiring customers. So going forward, there seems to be a lot more emphasis from the merchants that I'm speaking with and working with on learning more about their customers and kind of like having an owned asset as opposed to this rented platform of a social media network where there are a lot of variables that are outside of the control of a consumer or of a merchant.
Mhm.
So how do quizzes play into this? I
Yeah,
guess
sure.
that let's try to tie it together into they're losing a lot of these insights. They need to find new ways to own and operate this data. How can they do that with quizzes?
Yeah, great question. So if you've ever been on a site where, take a quiz. So I think that the value of a quiz ultimately is you want as a merchant to add value to the customer experience. So
Mhm.
some quizzes can be a product recommendation, like, hey, tell us about, what you're looking for, and we can surface the most relevant product immediately. Very much in the same way as you walk into a store and you speak with a sales associate, they'll ask a few questions, get an idea of maybe what your price point is and what you're looking for. And then, hey,
Mhm.
after a quick scan of the inventory in their mind, this product makes sense and here's why. There are other use cases. Skincare brands, for example, find a lot of value in a quiz because that's an experience where in person it's easier. You might want to match your skin tone or with the right foundation. And so where
Mhm.
there's a lot of choices to select from, it can be an overwhelming experience. So the goal is to kind of simplify it, narrow the choices, and make it easier. Or you might see for wine or coffee, for example, where Wink or First Leaf are wine brands, or Blue Bottle Coffee or Cuvée. Cuvée is kind of a local brand, where they'll ask simple questions like, do you like fruit or do you like chocolate? And with making it more accessible to a consumer, they're able to pin those preferences with their inventory. Okay, so that would mean that you might like a tannic red,
Mhm.
so that way where you don't want to overwhelm the consumer with too many choices, but making simple questions easy to answer and then recommending them a product at the end.
Did you ever take a quiz with Four Sigmatic?
I don't
No, I
remember.
haven't
I'm a
taken that
big
one.
I'm a big
Oh,
Four Sigmatic fan. We've talked about it a lot on the show, but I don't think I have either.
You didn't?
no, but we actually do have one brand called Teelixir, Teelixir, and they are basically mushroom, like a very similar to Four Sigmatic.
Mhm.
And the value of the quiz that they have is there are many, their products address different illnesses, whether or remedy different things like
Mhm.
immunity or like kind of a caffeine type replacement, energy, nausea, or I mean, they're like whatever your problems are, there's a
Yeah.
different lion's mane or mushroom
Mm.
that would be appropriate. But it's hard for a customer to understand which one would work because not many people are familiar with mushrooms as a medicinal, a medicine.
Mhm.
Mm.
So yeah, that's where the guiding the customer to the right product makes sense. But then also they're doing a really good job with their email and SMS program afterwards, leveraging Klaviyo and the personalization that you can get with the data from the quiz.
Gotcha. I feel like I'm very familiar with these e-commerce quizzes because I feel like a lot of brands that are geared towards women kind of really focus on it. Like take our fit guide, or take our style quiz, and the stylist will hand pick some stuff for you. Like Fabletics has one, SheFit has one, Stitch Fix has one. Like, do you find that quizzes are more often implemented in apparel than any other industry?
I don't think so, but maybe it started there. And like, for example, ThirdLove, which is
Yep.
a women's
Love them.
lingerie brand. I think that they pretty much innovated the fit quiz. So ThirdLove is their more comfortable bra. And what's really interesting, the CEO, Heidi Zach, has been transparent with how they use the data. So they've taken maybe like 10 million people have taken the quiz. And so they have all these millions of data points. And from that, sifting through that, that's like structured data in mass to identify where there are gaps or where there are challenges. And what they did, they realized that women were having problems finding the right fit, which was kind of like the genesis of the brand anyway. But more specifically, it was because like there weren't half sizes. So
Yep.
They innovated by releasing a half size, which nobody had done before. And that's another kind of ancillary benefit of a quiz, is that you're getting product research kind of like in a structured, scalable way. But to answer your question, Lisa, I don't know if it's women's brands or apparel per se, but I think any brand that would benefit from having an in-person sales associate or salesperson would benefit from a quiz. So that could apply to fragrance or food and beverage or clothes or jewelry or accessories, or mattresses actually are a very interesting quiz use case. So I think it kind of like ranges a spectrum of D2C brands and niches.
Yeah, it's interesting that you put it in the perspective of, if you have a salesperson, you would benefit from a quiz. Is that sort of the first question that you would a merchant should ask themselves if they want to consider a quiz? Should they say like, hey, if my product was in a store, would I benefit from a salesperson?
So how would they validate whether a quiz would work for them?
Yeah. And then I think the next step after that is like, how to even put together. There's so much power in question, right?
Well, you've got
like,
to ask
how
the
do you
right questions, though.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I usually tell brands, if they ask like, would a quiz be right for me? Most brands outside of like single SKU brands could benefit from a quiz, or maybe like a handful. And single SKU might not make sense because it's like, all right, you have one thing that you need to sell. So you need to, it's not that hard for a customer to understand, but they still could benefit from a quiz, because if you just take like, if a brand were selling a multivitamin, for example, there are many different benefits of a multivitamin. Is it to improve immunity, or is it to general health, or depending on the age or the gender, there are different use cases. And then that helps the positioning and the marketing that you can, that a merchant can execute. But yeah, I think what's helpful is to ask yourself, like, what data would be helpful to improve my marketing or to improve my positioning, or what do I need to know about customers, the end customer, to ultimately drive sales. And so I think there's an interesting gap, the customer experience gap, where merchants are maybe falling short of meeting customer expectations. So customers want personalized experiences. Like, Francois, you were asking yourself, like, well, if I'm not falling short on my own experience, if I allow this, if I don't allow Apple to track me, then who cares? I just will take my privacy. So, but you do want an experience, and you do want a better experience, and customers are willing to share the data in order to receive that better customer experience. But merchants and marketers are falling short in that personalization. And I think that's where there's a big upside, is because there's revenue attached to brands that can nail the personalized experience in terms of increased average order value or repeat purchases, and ultimately lifetime value.
And is that something that they have internally? Because there's, from a marketing perspective, you think, well, I think every piece of data is going to help me, right? I think the birth date, I think the gender, I think where they live. There's so many pieces of data that I think could help brands. For example, if you just wanted to target Metro Atlanta because you thought that your product really would sell well here versus Athens, Georgia, something like that. How do you start to put together what data is most important and that would reflect well through a quiz, and then putting together the questions to acquire that data, because you don't want to be boring, right? It's like, I saw one quiz, I think it might have been Hot Topic or Urban Outfitters, where it was like, what fits you? And it was like, well, is it a large from Nike? Is it a large from Adidas? Is it? And it was very engaged. It was very, oh, let me think about that next thing. But I'm sure they got a lot of data from me. There's a lot to unpack in that. But I guess, how do you decide on what to include in that quiz first?
Yeah, so there are a couple things, I guess, like what the main goal would be. So for a quiz, like our main values that we're hearing from merchants is improve conversion rate by making it easier to purchase, and you make it at the end of the quiz. The recommended product based on the quiz responses is right there. Add to cart, checkout, boom. So a higher conversion rate for those who take the quiz because it's easier. Then accelerated list growth by at the end of the quiz. There's an opt-in, which often is, I mean, that there's some nuances there. It's a higher opt-in rate from what we've seen than, say, a standard pop-up for 10% off, or like join our newsletter, which might be like 2 to 5%. And that's where the quiz can be a great hook, because there's a curiosity gap. Like, we as humans, we love to learn more about them ourselves. So if you're able to, ask yourself, like, what Hot Topic outfit is right for you, or what's your Stitch Fix style? We're learning, as we go through the quiz. And so it's that exchange of value that's really important. And then the last part is gathering the customer data, the zero party data. So yeah, what the question is, the second part of the question is what questions to ask?
Yeah, sort of. If you know the type of data that you want, how to not make the questions boring,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
Like how do you? I guess maybe it's a mindset, maybe it's a personality trait that you just need to have on your team, and they would bring that to the table. But I guess, what are you seeing in the conversations that you're having with merchants?
Yeah, I'm always a proponent of less is more. With every question that you add, there's going to be drop off. So I think that every single question should add value to the customer experience, and then also to you as a marketer. So some of the most important things are maybe what the challenges are, or what the problems are, what success looks like, or what they're trying to achieve. And then the outcome of that is the recommended product. So not to get too in the weeds, but with PreHook, for example, at the end, we recommend a product, and then that gets sent over to the email or SMS platforms, whether it's Klaviyo, Attentive, Postscript, OmniSend. And then from there, you can actually build out segments more specific to that recommended product. And then also, maybe you're layering in, if somebody's looking for a multivitamin for immunity, or just to stay healthy, or if it's a kid, then the positioning of that one product that's recommended is going to be vastly different based on who the end recipient is and what benefits they're trying to pull from that product. So I think thinking of it from like the customer perspective, so having that customer empathy to know like what might work, what you need to do to bridge the gap between where they currently are, where they want to go, and like how the product that you're selling can get them there.
And I imagine this can be brought up in various stages of the user journey or the customer journey, right? It could be brought up probably on a Facebook ad, even. It could be brought up when you log into a site and it's a pop-up. How are you seeing companies or merchants decide where they should be bringing these quizzes in. Obviously, they could all be different too, right? Something on a site could be a different quiz than you have on Facebook. But I guess, where are you seeing them put the quizzes, and how do you decide which place to put the quiz?
Yeah. So some of the quizzes are like requisite in order to start the journey. And that's specifically for subscription brands like Stitch Fix or Wink, which is subscription wine, or Trade Coffee, which is subscription coffee. And Stitch Fix, they have like maybe 80 questions, and they've basically become they become kind of like a data science platform in some sense, because it's so important to understand what the customers are looking for. Because if you're selling a recurring product every month, like that box has to be spot on, because that every product that the customer keeps is revenue, and the likelihood of churn is increased if it's a miss with the package. So that's where like the data is super important. But if it's a quiz where it's more just to like help the consumer, we've seen quizzes in, you know, the hero image or the nav, the footer, and definitely, as you mentioned, as a paid landing page, and also for email. Like you'll see brands use a quiz for their email list, which seems counterintuitive if one of the main value propositions of a quiz is that you're capturing a lead. It might be a different quiz, of course. You remove the email so it doesn't become redundant, but all of a sudden you're enriching your customer profile in Klaviyo or OmniSend that much more with the questions that you're gathering, so that you can improve the segmentation and you can dynamically insert what the recommended product is after the quiz.
I feel like another good place may be like depending on the product, obviously, like maybe like a 30-day later post-purchase, to be sure that you're even recommending the right product to people. Because if I'm buying, I don't know, mushroom coffee because I don't like the jitters of normal coffee and still want to feel energized and, you know, whatever, which I don't. He's the mushroom man over here. But if then later I'm not super satisfied with it, like it feels like that would be a good place to go back and be sure that you're even recommending the right item, or if your item is fitting the customer need, kind of a thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, most of our merchants use a quiz pre-purchase. And then there are specific brands, like say, for example, Inquire Labs, that do post-purchase surveys. But kind of like connecting the dots of, they said that they'd like this wine or this mushroom coffee, and then they actually reacted with this, and to kind of like split the difference. That's actually, I don't know that much about like how that calculation works. But yeah, post-purchase survey and data gathering, I think, is super important. And especially maybe if you're, for subscription, but then also you can maybe segment for, you know, your list. If you're talking, for example, like RFM segmentation, recency, frequency, monetization, and kind of like learn more about the customers of like their feedback on the product. But yeah, for us, I'm far more familiar with a pre-purchase quiz, but there's value. There's definitely a lot of value in the post-purchase.
Is there ever any implementation of not even like a pre-purchase quiz, maybe just being on the site, of trying to verify the need or the desire for a new item that you're developing? So maybe you're not trying to steer them towards something that you already offer, but maybe try to gauge whether or not there's an interest for something you're cooking up.
Yeah, I think so. I think the volume should probably be like significant. Like I was mentioning the Heidi Zach and ThirdLove quiz, where it becomes very apparent after you have, you know, X thousand or X million data points. But yeah, if you're able to acquire that much, we do have some brands who might just ask questions. Like, for example, if it's a candle brand, like what type of candle you like, or a drink, like what flavors do you like? And you can look at the analytics, and it might become very apparent which types of flavors or what profiles far over index the norm.
Which can impact your supply chain also, because then you know obviously how much you should be pushing maybe for marketing for certain types of products, and how much more you should be ordering, accounting that into your forecast. I mean, this one step can go so much deeper into the business.
Totally. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. And so is there a spot still in that user journey that you're finding you can ask more questions, or people are less prone to X out of the quiz? For example, me, when I see a pop-up, I try to get out of it as quickly as possible. That's just my thing. But Lisa, for example, it sounds like you have great experiences with
It
quizzes.
it depends. So I've definitely taken it for apparel online, and maybe that's why I'm more familiar with it, because like shopping online for one thing, women's clothing sizing is absolute crap, and that's a different, soapbox that I could get on, but I won't. But, I have taken the Third Love quiz, but I knew that that was kind of built into their process. I did the same thing with SheFit, and I think I looked at the sizing chart in IAB, but they don't have um a quiz for it, I don't think. But in general, like that's a question that I do have is what is what am I looking for here? The percentage of visitors to a site that actually take the quiz. Because I think it's different when they know it's built in, like with Curology, for example, the skincare brand, that's part of it. Versus if you're just visiting this new site that maybe your friend got a product from and you didn't know that that was kind of how they worked out. Like, what's the percentage of folks that actually take the quizzes?
Yeah, great question. And to be honest, I don't know the percentage because I don't often have back-end analytics of like what the denominator would be of overall people.
Sure.
But for completion rates, we're seeing, it could be like 70, 80, 90%. So maybe you can do napkin math. Okay, so you're getting like 2 to 5% opt-in on a pop-up. But if 90% of people are completing a quiz and X% are actually starting the quiz, then you're seeing that delta of an opt-in for via a quiz versus a pop-up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
That's a
yeah,
huge difference.
yeah. Again, I think it of course differs for every store. But if the value proposition of like, hey, why should I give you information, or what should I share with you, and what would I get in return? If that offer is high enough, then absolutely people are willing, and the data proves this out, people are willing to share in order to receive that better customer experience. And of course, for brands like Stitch Fix, it's a requisite. So 100% of customers on board via a quiz.
Yeah, but that does make sense, because I do often, if it's a pop-up like that, I do want to click out of it as soon as possible, especially if it's like a give us your email and you'll get 15% off. I'm like, you emailing me 3 times a day every day is not worth this 15% off. I do get out of it as quickly as possible. So that makes sense that there would be a higher completion rate for the quizzes than there would be for any of like the pop-up offers, for sure. Yeah.
And so is this something where when they complete the quiz, you should always, or are you seeing merchants often give them an offer after the quiz, or is it mostly just like a get to know yourself, or let us tailor your experience better?
Yeah, so there are discounts offered, which may be redundant if they're offering a 15% discount for anybody, and then a 50% discount if you take the quiz. Like, well, there has to be some incentive
Additional
more to take the
incentive.
quiz. Yeah. So yeah, I think I may be hearing a greater chorus or more people trying to move away from discounting with its impact on margin drain or reduce brand equity, or of course, Lisa, you're getting 50% off in the opt-in. What if I add it to cart and then not actually purchase? Maybe I'll get 25%. I don't know. Maybe I'm in the small e-commerce bubble, so like that's what people do. But yeah, I think ideally the offer of at the end of the quiz is significant enough to get people to take the quiz, and it's not a reliance on discounting.
And I know you don't have the back end data for how many people are, let's say, clicking out of a quiz, but are there industry benchmarks for different categories, or just types of products in general, or types of retailers, for those that are taking the quiz versus either leaving the site or dropping off? And I ask that because like Lisa was saying, for someone new, if I was prompted with a quiz at the beginning, and if I didn't care about the product enough to stay there, I would probably just hit the back button, go back. I don't care about this enough to actually stay here. Are there any industry benchmarks that companies can use?
Yeah, good question. I don't have any benchmarks, but what I do know is kind of like, and this is a little bit of like a small sample size, but seeing the merchants that are using PreHook, because we're tracking revenue contributed by the quiz. The brands that are doing really well. I mean, in terms of return on investment, those that have a higher average order value can see a significant return on investment, because, like, let's say a mattress like Helix, for example. Helix Sleep has a great quiz. They're learning about the customers in terms of like how many people would be sleeping on the mattress, how tall are they, how much do they weigh, what are their pain points in their sleeping, what positions. They go to the quiz, they go to the product description page afterwards, appropriate to the recommendation. But then it's the follow-up stuff where you can really tailor the communications, the campaigns, and the offers to what I'm like specifically feeling. And so, 10x ROI, because we're not necessarily like a high price point. PreHook isn't. So we're seeing a lot of return on investment, both in the quantified sales, but then also the untold, like not quantified part is the data that's being gathered.
Are there any questions, and this sounds like a silly question, but I'm thinking kind of a few steps forward here. Are there any questions that you would recommend folks not ask on the quizzes?
What I've heard is like birthday can be a little bit touchy.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So some have removed that, and then phone number. So phone number is like, it's kind of like the paramount question that you might ask, because brands are seeing such great success and return on investment with SMS marketing. So I always recommend including it. You can include it as an optional question. So that's not to say it shouldn't be asked. I think it should, but maybe after an email, and then maybe you're asking for a phone number, because there is definitely a lot that can be done once you have that, especially with SMS marketing. Like the zero party data is really important, because email is like one thing you can unsubscribe, but an SMS is far more personal, and so you're getting better engagement, better open rates, but also it's a quicker unsubscribe. So there's kind of like a delicate balance. So ideally you're able to segment really tightly, and send relevant and timely info.
But why birthday? Maybe I'm too like laissez-faire with my personal information, but if you ask me my birthday on a quiz like that, I expect a discount for my birthday month.
I usually lie.
Do you?
I do. I just go whatever is quickest, right? Yeah. I don't know. I don't necessarily think it's like a security risk, but maybe it's just a little bit invasive or personal. But that is what I've heard from brands that are asking birthdays, and then some have removed it because they haven't gotten great feedback from that.
Gotcha. And the reason I kind of asked that question, because we were talking about NFTs a little bit before we went live, and I was thinking about the conversation we had about the metaverse the other day, where some businesses are starting to offer, Bitcoin as a form of payment. Personal finances is like a very personal topic for people, right? It's a very touchy subject. A lot of people don't want to discuss whether or not they use crypto. Well, maybe not whether or not they use it. That's a big conversation, but how much they have in crypto or what crypto they invest in. So I'm wondering if you are a business owner who's looking to maybe begin offering crypto as a form of payment, and you want to learn whether or not your users have crypto, if that's a good or bad question to ask on a quiz.
That's a great question. That's an interesting question. I've never seen that. But would you ask that and then use it kind of like to learn more about your customers, and to like vet whether it's an option that you might want to offer?
Correct. Yeah, I'm thinking of it from that perspective.
Yeah. The latter?
Yeah.
Well, for both, to learn more about them, whether or not they are are crypto users, and if there's enough of them that use it and would be open, if you say like, do you currently invest in Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency? Yes or no. Have you ever used or would you be comfortable using Bitcoin or cryptocurrency to make online purchases? Like kind of validating both.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. But to be honest, the merchants, we work exclusively with Shopify merchants. And so they're kind of beholden to what Shopify offers. And at the moment, Shopify doesn't support crypto checkouts.
Got it.
But with that said, Shopify is testing minting and distributing NFTs, starting with Shopify Plus stores. So when you get to NFTs, that's a different story because NFTs can be more of like a one-way transaction to giving to consumers. Like, so for example, we now offer a question to allow brands to collect crypto wallet addresses. And like, well, what would you do with that? And in some ways, a crypto wallet address is like, I think, an email address on steroids in terms of being a competitive advantage, an asset, and something that you can grow into and has limitless possibilities. And from there, you can just airdrop NFTs or assets to customers. So not everybody's going to have a crypto wallet address. Maybe some of the more forward-looking or tech-savvy consumers. But with that NFT, you can offer exclusive discounts. You can offer invites to private communities. And in those private communities, you can do consumer research or R&D or offers or in real life meetups. There's a ton of stuff that you can do. And I think NFTs are going to start to play in that space, especially for VIPs to track loyalty and gift cards and stuff.
And on the topic of Shopify, how simple is it to implement quizzes? And, can you have different quizzes at different times? Can they be required versus not required? Can they be on different pages? I guess can we walk through the Shopify quiz
let's
process?
just get into how PreHook works. Like
for sure. If you're 42 minutes in and you're still here, then let's talk in the weeds. So how hard is it to install? It's as simple as dropping in a snippet of code. So no technical skill required. To build it out, I think like Francois, you mentioned earlier, like you might want to conceive what data you're trying to gather, then what that translates to in terms of like the questions that you're asking. And then, it's pretty much just like writing it up and answering and writing the questions and the answers. So it's super easy to create and then add to a page. And you can add multiple quizzes in different points. You can have different quizzes for different types. We do have brands that do that. And then also in terms of like why you would want to do it, I do recommend to brands to have separate quizzes for paid. So you'd have like a paid landing page dedicated to only paid traffic. And then it's just a little bit cleaner. You can know how that paid traffic is performing and behaving as opposed to kind of like direct or organic traffic. And then also, like I mentioned earlier, as a landing page for your email list, like if you want to learn more from your existing list, maybe you just take out that email question, email opt-in, and then maybe swap it in for or swap in an SMS question or just nothing at all. But
how customizable are the quizzes in terms of branding? Like, could I enter in my brand's color code so that it matches the aesthetic of the rest of my site? And looks okay.
Yeah,
cool.
Totally.
Yeah.
And all this is done in PreHook, right? Within PreHook?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And so PreHook is a third-party Shopify app. So it's basically in your Shopify dashboard. After you install PreHook, then you can take care of it there.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I know we touched on earlier, less is more, right? When it comes to the number of questions, but is there an average number of questions that you should be having? And I imagine I wouldn't want to answer if I cared about something. I'm definitely not answering 85, but I would want to answer maybe 3.
I was going to ask if there's a limit to the number of questions you can put on.
No, there's not. And so some quizzes might have like 30 questions, but we can have conditional logic, which is basically like, if Francois likes blue, then ask, this. Or,
Sure.
So yeah, the number of questions on the back end is far different. But yeah, I think maybe like generally 3, 5, 7, something like that. As long as it doesn't get a little bit too whimsical, or I don't know, maybe I'm too practical minded, but like some quizzes might have a question of like, what season do you like? Or, like if you were a drink, what type of drink would you be? Those things you're like, what, like, how would you use
Essentially
that?
just BuzzFeed quizzes on
Exactly.
your
Yeah. Yeah.
But you really, if it was something that you were actually like cared about, you wouldn't answer more than 3, Swa? Like,
Probably not. I mean, it's
really?
just like why I know why they care being from this perspective, but from a consumer perspective, I'm like, I just came here for my one type of mushroom coffee. I don't care what else you're trying to offer me. I'll answer a few questions if I think it'll help me, but like, what do you need that's more than 3 questions from me? I
don't
think
know.
most things could be answered probably in 3 questions.
I guess
You could
from
do a
my
root cause
perspective-
analysis in 5 whys. I mean, it's like
I
3?
guess
3's
from
good.
my perspective, I'm okay with answering more than 3 if they're relevant and they're not superfluous, and I do think that it's going to get me closer to finding the right product. I think I'd be way more open to. We've learned this already. It's canon. We're very different consumers.
Yeah,
But
like
yeah.
Kate took the quiz for me for it was, I don't remember which one it was, Hot Topic or Urban Outfitters or
It was
something.
probably
But
Urban
that was like
Outfitters.
10, 15 different questions about like how an XL fits you. And it's,
But
is
it's a legitimate question.
it is, but like I don't care. I'm getting that shirt or not.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, you just order both sizes and then wear whichever one you feel
Yeah, and
like.
just return one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, I guess, from both perspectives, from a merchant perspective and a consumer perspective, for quizzes. Obviously, I guess one question that leads or comes to mind for merchants is, how is the data managed effectively? Are you seeing any tools that are being used to sort of analyze like consumer data from quizzes?
I just saw Audacity raise $15 million, so maybe that's a tool. But a lot of the brands would basically just use it for segmentation via Klaviyo or in Omnisend. So you'd just be like layering in the custom properties or layering in custom properties on top of transaction history or other things that you might have. So segmentation is probably the most helpful. And then the second good way of using the data is just dynamically inserting things. So for example, in a Klaviyo campaign, you'd have, one email, say your post quiz flow, and maybe you wait 10 minutes, make sure that they haven't purchased, and you'd have like a split, if they did purchase, don't send them this. But if they did not purchase, then add, product recommendation 1, whatever that is. And then so it's kind of like build once and scale infinitely. That's a nice way to use the quiz data as it comes through in your email platform.
And what is a service like PreHook, or what does PreHook cost to a Shopify seller to use? Because I know that you said it's a built-in third-party app. Is there like a membership fee?
Yeah. So it's kind of like a standard software as a service. So 14-day free trial, and then prices start from $35 a month. Cancel anytime, no commitment. So yeah, we have a lot of brands that will try it just as like a channel, or maybe to see if it works well, if it's interesting, if the data is helpful, if it generates a positive ROI. So,
Is there a certain level of traffic they should? I know we touched on it a little bit earlier too, but is there like a certain level of traffic that you're seeing companies need? Like if a brand just launched, would you suggest that they just start off with quizzes immediately? Or should they gain some level of traffic and maybe some brand recognition before implementing quizzes on site?
It's a good question. I think, my foundational philosophy is that like the more you know, the better. And I don't think that there's too early of a time to start learning that stuff. So if you're just launching, maybe that like there are a ton of other moving parts to address first. But a quiz is like we started, at the very beginning when I was saying it's not just a quiz, but it's more of like a customer data platform or a channel to learn more about your customers. And there ultimately is no time limit on that. Like the more you know about them, that can have long-term benefits and also kind of omni-channel benefits in terms of like, and one thing that we didn't talk about yet is like how this data extends to paid traffic. So, you can create segments in Klaviyo and then port them over to Google Ads or Facebook Ads. And then you're seeing more alignment in the customer experience across different channels.
So you can send out, so the more, and this I guess just goes through sort of the customer segmentation also, you can send out tailored ads based on the responses from the quizzes. So if they care about, and just stop me whenever, but if they care about fat loss versus weight maintenance or just health, you could send out 2 different ads based on the quiz that they took, and that just ports over immediately from Klaviyo. Is that right?
Well, yes and no. So it's like you'd create the segment in Klaviyo, and then
Okay.
that segment of those who want to lose fat, that's kind of like a self-contained segment that you're running ads to. But it's not automated. You have to set it up. Then you have your creative that you're layering in and stuff. But yeah, you can make sure that you know that people who are looking for this problem or this solution get this messaging and this creative.
Got it. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, like you said, there's tremendous upside to this for $35 a month, especially. It dives all the way into from your paid ads and your paid spend to supply chain, like we mentioned. I mean, knowing what type of inventory you should be focusing on, what's working, what's not working, and in today's environment where it's hard to even get your product shipped in if they're coming from overseas, hard to get things delivered. I mean, this is a tremendous tool. This is awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
To ask a somewhat similar question to what Francois did, is there like a ideal customer avatar to work with PreHook? Do you guys have like a best fit for customer? Again, I can never ask a question well. I warned you ahead of time.
No. This is a conversation anyway. Best fit, I think. Well, for our tool specifically, we're only on Shopify. But for like who would a quiz be helpful for? I think like the way that I usually answer it is like if you'd have somebody having a conversation to learn more about your customer and then recommending a product appropriately, like you can't do that obviously with e-commerce, or you could have a virtual fitting, or you can just do it at scale, build it and set it up once with a quiz, and then you can do it 24/7. But yeah, I think in the context of 2022, the value of customer data, the customer demands on personalization, I think the more that you're learning about customers, the better. So yeah, maybe outside of a single SKU product, you might want to consider a quiz and maybe even just give it a test.
And
it's just for the cost of a dinner.
Well, I was going to say, people spend more on coffee each month than that. I mean, you're a frequent Starbucks or each week.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really interesting question, is like, what would the monetary value of customer data be? Probably to answer that, you think like, okay, what's the incremental upside of personalizing or sending more relevant emails? You could probably connect that to an uptick in conversions via on-site or email or SMS or paid.
Yeah, attribution and this halo effect is really, it seems to be the end of every conversation that we've had, where it's well, yeah, you could do everything in paid, that'll increase your organic across all channels, and well, okay, what's the value of the organic because you already have the paid? So it's very tricky, right, to attribute, hey, the quizzes will actually increase your costs or your sales that much and reduce your cost elsewhere. It'll be interesting to see in the next few years, I think, someone develop something. So it's probably going to be something AI powered or machine learning that just ties all these dots together of like, hey, this is exactly the path that you were looking for. I'm excited to see it.
Totally. You'll buy it. You won't even know why.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I already am.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much. If folks want to learn more information about PreHook or about you, where can they find more info?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for having me, Lisa and Francois.
course.
Yeah, email me, Gen, that's GEN @prehook.com. Happy to build out a quiz, jump on a call, share strategies, email, whatever. And then you can check out PreHook at prehook.com, and that'll link over to the Shopify App Store where you can install it for free.
Perfect. PreHook.com, everybody, in the description of the audio and video, as always. Yeah, again, thank you so much for joining us. This has been awesome. It's a very exciting tool that you have, and I didn't realize that it was so cheap. That's awesome.
I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you.
Oh, of course.
I thought it was you were gonna come out and say like, oh, it's $500,000 a month or something, or a year,
or it's like we get a portion for every quiz that's taken. Like,
yeah,
you know,
it's the cost of a dinner. People,
Yeah,
if you go to dinner once a month, you can afford PreHook and just test it out with your consumers.
That is a good point. I'll test that out.
He's gonna add that as a new USP on the website. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to give us a thumbs up, comment with your thoughts, share this episode with your friends, and subscribe to the show. Don't forget to turn on those automatic downloads and notifications. And that way you never miss an episode with leaders in supply chain and e-commerce like Gen Furukawa with PreHook. Again, thank you again so much.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.